Hey guys, just doing a bit of a video today talking about one of my favourite pastimes, which is sports photography. The video will be focused mainly on AFL football, and there's a bit of an excuse for me to show off some of my photos I've taken down at Geelong and describing some of the techniques and imagery that I might use in my editing and taking the photos themselves, and why it's so important to me. I've told this story before, but the reason that I started taking photos, I got my camera to do some uni work, and from there I started taking photos at the football, and then one thing turned to another and I was going pretty much every week. If it wasn't a Geelong home game, I'd go up to Melbourne in the early days and take some photos up there. So yeah, just a bit of a discussion about sports photography as a topic and some more of the technical side of things as well. So let's talk about it. So as I said, I got my camera for uni and I started taking my camera to the football, and the first photo that I really thought, wow, this is something I might want to do long term here, was a photo of Nat Fyfe. This photo here, you just get a lot of the detail with the muscles and the emotion in the players' faces, and just seeing the ball go across his body like that really was really cool. And yeah, like I said, that was one of the first photos where I thought I actually want to do this long term, because that was really fun. And when I say fun, I mean I enjoyed going to the footy and watching the footy, but fun taking photos because I've been watching footy for quite a long time. I sort of knew what would happen, where the ball would go, what's going to happen next, and I could sort of anticipate what sort of emotions or reactions I would get from the players. So obviously if they're going for a mark, they'll catch the ball and their face might contort a bit, or it's basically just all the facial emotion that you get from not just the footy players but any sport. I'll be using some footy specific terms, but you could put this across pretty much any sport, taking photos of an athlete, so yeah, it's still relatable to things like that. But yeah, that first photo of Fyfe really got me started. Basically the first couple of games I took that and I thought, yeah, I really want to do this more, so I started doing little bits and bobs here and there, and eventually a friend of mine, Paddy, who you will see a photo of shortly, invited me to come take photos at the Vic Open Disc Golf Championships in 2015, which is something I hadn't really heard of until Paddy started speaking to me about it, and he's actually just been to the States recently. He's getting really good at it, so good on you, Paddy. But yeah, I was taking some photos of some of the guys out there at that tournament, and it was a good chance for me to practice some of my framing and positioning in regards to where I'd be sitting or standing, to where the athlete was sort of focused, front, back, side. So that was really good practice for me then. So firstly, here's the photo of Paddy, and at the time I thought these were pretty good photos. Obviously I just had a pretty basic kit lens, which was like just a pretty basic zoom kit lens in my 600D, and I'd just be focusing on trying to get the emotion in the person's face and trying to pick up the details and the facial expressions of concentration and determination, and I think that's what made these images good for me at the time. Obviously now as we look through these, they're not the best quality images. You can see that the framing is there, and the focus on the subject, whether that be the athlete's face or the frisbee, for example, is there. But yeah, just the overall picture quality isn't fantastic at all. But that would probably just come down to me learning how to use the camera and what settings to use, and the gear itself wasn't the top of the line best quality gear, so that's fine. This is just Ferg here, another mate of mine. I thought this was probably the better ones of the bunch. It's just a nice pose, I thought. It's just getting the arm and the bicep in there, and you can see like he's got his head down, he's determined, he wants to make this putt with the frisbee. So that was the first sort of year I did sport photography, and I did a couple of things, mainly just footy and that disc golf thing, and I hadn't really done a lot other than that. But I just kept going to games and practicing and doing bits here and there, and that brings us into sort of the next stage of what I was doing, and probably during the 2015-2016 AFL season, so 2 to 3 years ago now, and that's when I was really starting to get out more and take more photos at games. So there's some games here from Melbourne and Collingwood and St Kilda, and again, like the disc golf stuff, you can see that the framing there and the subject matter is there, but especially this one with Daniel Cross, like the image quality just isn't there, and that I think was because I was sitting quite far back, quite a fair way away from the fence. Obviously, if you're taking photos, you try and get as close as possible to the subject, then you can get that better background blurring, the bokeh, if you've got a zoom lens. But yeah, overall the image quality of these wasn't fantastic, but it was good practice for me still, and I still posted a lot of these to my Instagram at the time, but I was just finding my feet a little bit still, but just getting out there as much as possible, and I was still having a lot of fun at this stage, and I was really getting into getting all the reactions and the moments in the game, and I think that was what spoke to me the most, was capturing that moment. So not only was I there as a spectator, but I was there almost on the ground, because I could take that moment home with me on my camera and then, you know, upload. I could edit it and play around with it, and it would be like my perspective of that moment. So that was cool. The next stage, and this is where things start to kick off a bit more, is where I was playing around a few more fancy edits and things. So these images flashing across now, they're from some home games at Geelong, and I started trying to introduce, you know, backgrounds, a white background, black background, depending on the mood. And at the end of this sort of year, I started introducing these white sort of backgrounds and skinny crops to the images, whether that be horizontally or vertically. For taller players, I tended to do like a vertical crop. If it was too rough when contesting a ball, I would do like a straight up crop, and that would just give it some height, and sort of the edit helps tell more of a story to the image, and I thought that was pretty cool. At the time, I don't do as much, especially with the background now. I still do the vertical and horizontal crops, but it's definitely to help tell more of the story rather than be like a visual cue to look at the photo, if that makes sense. The last sort of stage of my sport photography career has just been this year, especially now that I've got my 70-200 2.8 lens, which has really helped, because that obviously is a class above the lens I did have when I started, especially pairing that with the 5D Mark III. Just the overall quality of the images started to go up, and I started to learn a bit more about myself and the different editing techniques I would employ. And I normally focused a lot on the players and the athletes, but there's also, when you're at the ground, there is a lot of things happening around you at the sporting venue that relate to what you're watching on the field, which can still be just as important. So this example here is of Reece Stanley, who's a player for Geelong. He wasn't playing in this particular game in West Coast. He was a late out, but he came and sat right in front of me and my dad in the crowd, and at half time they were down by a considerable margin, and one of the West Coast fans was giving him a bit of lip. So as he was walking down to the rooms at half time, he was just sort of having a chat to him, saying like, "Calm down mate, it's not over yet." And it ended up being one of my better photos I've probably taken at a sporting event, because it's almost like a framed portrait of Reece, and you can see that nice blurred background, and you can still tell he's obviously at a sporting event, because you can sort of make out the dots and the heads of the different people. But yeah, I thought this was one of my better photos that I've taken. This was the first real times I used my 70-200, so I was like very excited that I was taking good photos like this. Here's an example of a horizontal crop that I used. Liam Ryan had just kicked a goal on Jack Henry, and he was really excited. He did the double cobra bicep pump up, and I just had this really cool horizontal crop which I added to the picture, and that just gave it a sense of power, because first thing you see is obviously the blue jumper that he's wearing and his pose that he's doing. But then you see off to the right, you see Jack Henry's just had a goal kicked on him, he's not too happy, and you get just a bit more detail in that background with the lines of the ground and Jack Henry looking somber, so you can sort of tell the story for yourself, what's just happened. There's another portrait here of Lee Matthews, which I was really excited to take, because he's a legend of the game, and he was doing an interview on the boundary at the Hawthorn Sydney game earlier in the year, and he was talking to all the kids at the front, and we were pretty much just behind them. So he turned to the side, and I got like this really cool side profile shot of him, and that's also probably one of my favourite photos that I've taken during my time as a sports photographer, just because there's lots of detail in his face. It's black and white, it's just a classic image, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. that just lends itself again to that idea that it's not always just about what's happening on field as well. It can be what's happening right in front of you, whether there's kids hanging over the fence trying to get an autograph of Lee Matthews, or something else happening in the crowd behind you, people celebrating and cheering. So they could also be big moments that tell a story as well. These are just some photos from the rest of the year that are going through now, and I really started finding my feet in regards to the editing of images as well. Love doing a black and white photo, but you have to be careful when you pull one of them out, because it has to be the right sort of mood. It's difficult to get a black and white photo of someone celebrating. They have to sort of be in the right pose. Definitely you can do a black and white photo of someone who's looking remorseful or like they've just lost a game, but what I've tended to do recently is drop the vibrance in Lightroom of skin tones and skin colours, and upping the saturation a little bit, or keeping the saturation normal of jumper colours. And to me that just is a representation of the idea that that's what the fans see when they look at these players. They just see their heroes running around in the uniform and the colours, kicking goals, taking marks and doing such awesome things and celebrating, and that was really cool to me because those colours just pop, especially some of the brighter uniforms like Sydney and Bulldogs and Geelong have got some nice blues. I just really found the idea of making the colours pop of the players and making the focus on the emotion and what the fan might see, and that's what all my photos are. From a fan's perspective, you can sort of relate to what these photos are and what they mean to other people, because if other people were to see these, that's probably, I'll use this one here of Hawkins as an example. You can see he's got like two guys on him. He's jumping up for the ball's going over his head, but he's still contesting, and a lot of people can relate to that because they often see Tom Hawkins, having two guys on him and still contesting and throwing people around and doing his best to get the ball. So I feel like that's a good analogy to make. One of the most powerful things about sport photography is that it can really connect with an audience on specific issues. If I can use Wayne Ludby's photo of Nicky Winmar lifting up his shirt and pointing at his skin as an example, that's one of the most famous photographs in Australian football history in regards to taking a stand against racism. And it still now is one of the most famous photos in sporting history, I would say. That photo proves that athletes can transcend the game and the idea of they're just players playing a game, and that to me is important because they're not just numbers or stats or players on a ground. They are people with ideas and beliefs and reasonings behind their actions as well. They're not just figures out on the ground, basically. And I think that's what I try and capture in my work is the emotion and the artistry and the courage and the athleticism and all those different emotions that encompass being a high performance athlete and all the negative things that come with that. And I think that's important to remember too, because you can go out and take photos at any sporting event, but I think the most important thing is trying to capture the human emotion and the actual feat of whatever that sporting event may be, whether it's kicking a goal in footy, doing a great shot in tennis, dunking someone in basketball. If you capture that moment well, you'll get a good photo if you focus on the human element, and that's sort of what I've been going off basically in my sport photography career so far. So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to do a bit of a video talking about my philosophies and techniques in sporting photography and why it is so important to me. I'll be doing a few more videos on all the main styles of photography that I do, so I'll be setting myself some homework in regards to doing a bit of a talk about all the 4 or 5 different types of things that I do. Hope you enjoyed this video as I gave you a bit of an insight into what I do in regards to sport photography, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.